Tensions between Iran, America and Israel flared up again with new events. The war for dominance continues between Iran and Israel. Iran's support for Palestine and America's support for Israel puts the countries in a deadlock. America increased financial and arms aid to Israel. Likewise, Iran has almost tripled its attacks and aids to the groups it supports, following the expiration of its agreements with the United States and the United States' decision to withdraw from the Middle East. He also states that he will increase these shipments even more. On the other hand, he says that even though America will withdraw from the region, this region will continue to support Israel and the groups. They do not want Iran and Russia to be too strong in the region. We already understand this from the attacks on Iranian military sites. On the other hand, we also know about the cyber attacks carried out jointly by the United States and Israel. These cyber attacks are aimed at the facilities where Iran conducts nuclear and ballistic studies. The main reason for the great problems between these countries is Iran's desire to conduct nuclear studies. Israel and America say these efforts are too dangerous for the Middle East. For this fundamental reason, countries clash with each other. For example, Israel and Iran's attack on merchant ships at the first opportunity. It is also important in terms of superiority in this region. Because trade routes and natural resources are very important for the country that dominates the region. It means both economic freedom and having a say in trade routes. You can have a lot of say in regions where countries such as Syria and Iraq are located. In short, you can be very advantageous in the Middle East. Let's take a closer look at the topics we talked about. We said that Iran and Israel mutually hit each other's ships in the seas. This route almost ends both the trade and shipment of these two countries. In contrast, Iran is said to be producing new ships. Iran has launched one of its new stealth catamaran missile corvettes, according to open-source intelligence analyzed by Hatzerim. He noted that this distracted many, watching the Iranian Makran warship approaching Britain this week. Meanwhile, a new boat was launched in the past weeks. The boat, a large, stealthy catamaran design, was launched at a shipyard on Keshem Island between June 27 and July 2, says Sutton. This ship is described as one of the few ships under construction that will be referred to as the Shahed Soleimani-class ships. 65 meters long, it will apparently use anti-ship missiles and air defense. In April, a satellite image from Planet Labs, also analyzed by Sutton, noted that it includes the third of Iran's new catamarans designed for this class of ships. This little-known shipyard near the Strait of Hormuz is attached to the Revolutionary Guards and has been greatly expanded, he wrote. The expansion of the shipyard means that new larger and wider ships will be produced. On the other hand, if they can actively use these ships they have built, they will be in a stronger position in and around the Strait of Hormuz. They can also send aid to Palestine and surrounding groups much more easily if they are in an advantageous position. In this case, the threat to Israel will increase with the withdrawal of the United States from the region. Because when they directly support Palestine, attacks against Israel will increase. In addition, with the United States' withdrawal from the Middle East, cooperation between Israel and the United States will decrease. Even if it receives financial support, Israel will have to maintain sole control of the region. As for the United States' response to Iran's Hamas and its nuclear work, former United States Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley warned the Biden administration not to return to the nuclear deal with Iran in a speech to supporters of Israel on Sunday. Speaking at the annual Christians United for Israel Leadership Summit in Dallas, Texas, Haley said that Iran's primary goal by funding groups in the Middle East region is to target the United States and destroy the State of Israel. Iran is the biggest financial backer of HMAs. He said Israel's last 11-day war is not only with Hamas. Israel is fighting against Iranian weapons, Iranian money and Iranian-trained groups. They are very worried about withdrawal. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who recently returned from his solidarity trip to Israel, also spoke at the conference. He said he wasn't sure the Biden administration would confront Iran if Iran determined it was on the verge of acquiring nuclear weapons. He recalled his 90-minute conversation with former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and, separately, Defense Minister Benny Gantz, in which he asked whether Israel had the capacity and will to act to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. And my answer, with some caution, was a promising, yes answer, he said. As is known, Israel says that if Iran produces nuclear energy, it will directly hit its nuclear facilities. They even say they've modernized their F-35s accordingly and could completely destroy their facility. As for the Iranian side, They say that they have renewed their air defense systems for this attack plan of Israel and that they cannot attack this area in any way. They also state that they can protect every region of Iran at the maximum level. For this reason, even if a direct attack is not carried out, Israel and the USA can already achieve what they want with cyber attacks. In the attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities, even a 2-second power outage caused too many systems to break down and wasted effort. Later, Israel took responsibility for the events and said that these attacks would continue. We also know about the recent explosions near the nuclear facility in Tehran. Although no one has claimed responsibility for the attacks, Iran says we know directly that Israel carried out these attacks. Because a few days after Israel told it to stop its nuclear work, the attacks resumed. In addition, Iran has invested a lot in cyber defense systems since 2018, as cyber attacks have damaged Iranian facilities so much. In other words, the two parties cannot mutually agree and create new strategies. We know that there are very violent events between Iran and Israel and that strategic moves continue. So, can there be diplomacy between Israel and Iran? U.S.-Iranian delegation pays bridge-building visit to Israel. The delegation will arrive in Israel as part of the U.S.-led Cyrus Accords, aimed at reinvigorating historic ties between Iran and Israel amid Tehran's continued calls for Israel's destruction and anti-Semitic rhetoric. This thought brings to mind your worst security nightmares. But this is a peace mission. A delegation of Iranian expatriates, including former political prisoners, is traveling from the U.S. to Israel on a 4-day solidarity trip to build bridges between the Iranian and Israeli people. The Israeli government recently approved the trip. The Iranian student protested and was subsequently imprisoned and tortured. He was abducted from Iran while on medical leave from prison and was granted asylum by the U.S. government. So 30 years later, when I left the country, I had a chance to read other sources that contained the facts, and I think that people living in Iran now who have no access to independent sources should know history. I'm talking about almost the entire Middle East, including Israel, he said. We have to open the windows to the two nations. They need to talk directly to each other. So I think this is a good opportunity right now. We're going to go there and talk to NGOs, he said. Our aim is to convey the message of the Iranian people seeking freedom in an honest, transparent and open manner. They want friendship with Israel and said they will continue this program. Non-governmental organizations want to be an intermediary to reduce the tension between the two countries. But the decisions of both countries and what they have to say are very important. Although they say they are hopeful that diplomacy can be done, we will see the official results after the talks are over. Can the war between the two countries and the ice between them be melted with such organizations? We will see you all in the coming days. We have come to the end of another video. You can support us by liking the video. You can easily follow new videos by subscribing. I wish you all happy days. See you. By subscribing. I wish you happy days. See you.